All right, we'll start the session. We still have some folks coming in. Again, my name is Mary Beth, and I am with Sponsor Circle. Our goal today is to have a chat about sponsorship related to COVID. Brian McCabe and Brent Brodies are here to have the coffee chat. The goals of the session is really to ensure that you have the opportunity to ask questions as you feel that you need to, and just to make sure that everyone is familiar with how to use Zoom. I know that a lot of people have been on webinars. I want to make sure that you're able to engage as you want. First of all, on the top right-hand side of your screen, you have the gallery view or the speaker view. That allows you to see everyone that's on the call or not. And then on the bottom left-hand side of the screen, you can turn on your mic or turn on your video as you like. Also, we encourage you to use the chat feature. You can see it down at the very bottom and just beside the green button, and that allows you to open up a panel on the right-hand side of the screen, and it allows you to ask questions. We'd like to use that panel to encourage conversation, and so if you have any questions and if you're not interested in asking using your audio, you can always type on the chat webinar chat feature panel so that we can collect the questions and ask them as we move through the session. So again, it is a session for you, so please feel free to ask anything as we move through the conversation. I'm just looking here. I'm still adding folks into the session, but it is 1:05, so I'm going to now.
Hi, Mary Beth. This is Anne Andrusation in Kingston, Ontario.
Hi, how are you?
I am good. I know from previous Zoom meetings that there's often some really interesting stuff in the chat that other people will answer in the chat. And I know you send recordings afterwards, but is there any way for you to capture that chat and send it? What I usually end up doing is trying to cut and paste it as they're being answered, and that's very tedious.
Oh, okay. No, you know what? I do have the recording on to capture the webinar, the audio, as well as the chat. So I am happy to send that information onward as well.
That would be super. Thank you. And I'm going to mute again now.
Okay, that sounds great. One thing also is we are posting these webinars on our website, and Brent will also be posting versions of them as well onto his website, so we'll be able to send that information off to you as well at the end of the session. So if there's any other questions related to the Zoom setup, ask away. Otherwise, I will pass it over to Brad.
Great, thanks, Mary Beth. So welcome everybody. This is the second session we've run like this. Last week we did one focused on municipal sponsorship, and really happy to have you as the first of two sessions we're running with Brent today. Had really good pickup for being engaged with this session. So we had 60 people register for this session and another 60 register for the second session today. So definitely timely. And there's a lot of people looking to engage with one another and taking some time to reset. So we're now, what, 3 weeks into stay at home, work from home, looking at all of our events being changed and the delivery of those coming in a different format, delayed format, or being canceled outright. So you're sitting with partners who are looking for benefit. There are sponsors who are also on this call, as well as properties. There's a number of agencies too. So they've got benefits that they're looking for, business drivers that you want to deliver on. So how do we come together, deliver programming the way we would like to do it, as well as look at different formats for how this is going to work out. So, you know, a couple of things we've been looking at, just even as starters, is how are you managing your conversations through this crisis? So the conversations, have you had those conversations with your partners yet? If you haven't, we can start talking about some of the things you should be doing. What different elements can you be doing now in terms of building your program, looking at what's going on with your program, how that's going to be modified, and then what's the groundwork for the next steps. All crises have a beginning, middle, and an end. So we know this is going to come to an end. So how do we set ourselves up for having a great runway once we've cleared all of this? So from a sponsor circle side, we're helping organizations begin to look at their offering, piece together how they can be working with their partners and working with them to manage some of these elements. I know Brent is working in a very similar capacity, and happy to have him here as part of this discussion. So we're going to kind of lay the groundwork and some of the discussion for today, but really want to have you join in as much as Brent and I can talk for a full hour. This is meant to be an open discussion, and we can definitely learn from each other through this process. So feel free to jump in on the chat and ask questions, or you may get picked on from us, because we know a number of you, to get your input for how it's going with your team and your programs. And what I'll do is I'll turn it over to Brent now, just give a bit of an introduction of what you've been up to.
Thanks a lot, Brett. Thanks to Sponsor Circle for having me on the show with you. This is great. As well, thanks to everybody who's tuned in. This is a great size group to be able to have interaction and discussion. So I've did background. I'm just, the last 2-3 weeks have been spent working with clients one-on-one, helping them to move and plan, as you described, Brad, the immediate short-term scenario on how to manage their sponsorship program amidst COVID-19. And now we're shifting. We tend to be shifting with most of those clients and others to help them to plan the recovery process and then the long-term post-COVID-19 scenario. So that's what we've been up to. I thought that this would be couple 2-3 weeks, and I would get a little bit of extra work done, some client stuff possibly done on inventories, asset valuations, possibly done early for them, but my time has been pretty booked up solid for the last 3 weeks, and by the looks of it, we're probably in this isolation program till at least the end of May, and that's most of the messaging that I'm getting back. So.
Great. I mean, definitely the crisis is changing day by day, and we're seeing 2 weeks extended to 2 months or 1 month, depending on your location. Looking at events being canceled out as far as July. This is a big season for brands looking to deliver on their engagement that's being impacted, and then all of us who are on the property side seeing those impacts. Brent, what's your advice been to the clients you've been working with about the communications they should be having with their partners at the moment?
I think it's a good question, Brad, because there's really 2 types of communication scenarios that we're providing information onto our clients, and one of them is that initial communication and ongoing communication with your partners. I don't care whether you're, I know Terry Andreo's here from ATB, so I don't know whether, the brands, whether you're a brand or whether you're a property, whether it's a municipality, a charity, a sport team, there has to be ongoing communication. Both those groups should be either picking up the phone or setting up a Zoom call or setting up a telephone call. And the questions that need to be asked at that initial stage and ongoing are no different than you would ask of your family and friends. How are you doing? What's being affected in your organization? What is different? How are your staff doing? How are, say you had Air Canada as a sponsor. Have you talked to Air Canada? How are they doing? They just, they laid off 16,000 people. And how is that feeling the mood, and understand the strife they're going through. And at the same time, knowing that, I'm just going to use this Air Canada example, but they just re-announced that they are going to hire back those 16,000 people they laid off. or at least 16,000 of the new one, or the ones that have been laid off, and they are going to get retroactive pay back to the middle of March. And at the same time, Air Canada's released to all their Aeroplan members that, hey, we appreciate the loyalty that you've given us over the years. And we want to tell you right now that your status, whatever you were at the 35,000 level, or whether you were a super elite with Air Canada and Aeroplan, they are committing to that status level right through to December 2021. So those are messages. And if I have Air Canada as a partner, I would want to be sharing that. I would want to be, and that's the second thing is number one, the communication is about how are you doing? What do you need? How can we help you in this time? And that should be the brand asking the sponsor asking the property, and the property should be asking that of the sponsor. And then at the same time, that second part of the communication window is how do you message that? If Air Canada is your sponsor, those are the things. You shouldn't be hearing it from me. You should have already heard it from them. And you should be out the door with social and digital and telling people about how proud you are of your partner and that they're doing this or they're doing that. And it may be other things that they're doing in the community, whether they're, I know that TELUS, for example, is working closely with the TELUS Convention Center in Calgary and providing, it's been converted over for a homeless shelter. So those are the types of things, those are the stories that you should be communicating about your partners. I think that's really what we're telling clients from a communication perspective right now. And there's that obvious element that it's a shift to digital, shift to virtual, and that is essential.
Great, yeah, and I think that's been pretty consistent in the conversations we've been having with our clients, and one of the sort of associated conversations has been about contracts. There's such a big issue around finances right now that organizations are really trying to pivot what they're doing, looking at some of the some of their contracts and saying, okay, we got cash flow issues, whether it's coming from the property side or the brand side, trying to manage those conversations. And our advice to our clients is work with them. It's not a short-term win that's going to get you out the door and set up for a great relationship moving forward. It's what kind of flexibility can you put in. Engaging force majeure, that's, have the conversations with your legal team about that. But we're not providing that legal advice, but definitely it's how can you accommodate? So is there a way that, they're having an issue right now looking at, there's a major bike supplier on the European circuit for cycling called CCC. And they're looking at it going, we've had to lay off 5,000 people from our company. How can we justify what we've been spending in sponsorship and then have all these people laid off? So it's looking at the middle ground of, can you work with flexible payments? Can you look at different benefits that you're going to be delivering? And what can you manage from an organization? I don't know if you've had similar stuff that you've been having conversations with, Brent.
Yeah, I would agree that those discussions need to go down. You need to be talking, and if you're a smaller organization, and I know Carly's on here from Redstone, and they represent SMCC, and there may be some of those partners that are foundational partners, that, and I don't know when their 10,000 is due or whatever, but they may say, you know what, I can't do that right now, or there may be installment payments that you have a sponsor and they're in for $250,000 or $240,000 a year, and they're paying $20,000 a month, and you're invoicing them. And they may say, and I know we've got clients like that that said, well, we can't continue to pay right now. Well, in those cases, hey, you know what? We're going to let it go. We'll just for one of our clients, for example, and I understand this is consulting, not sponsorship, but we said, you know what? For now, let's reschedule your payments to start again in July. And we talked to them about that in the middle of March. In the middle of July, or beginning of July, we'll take a look at it again. If they're still not generating revenue, there's no sense in me invoicing them. So you as a property need to understand that some of those companies that have given you money up front and they need to make payroll next week, then they need their money back, and you need to understand that. On the other side, I know that with Hockey Canada, and as Dana had mentioned recently in a press release and in a news conference, that there was, nobody at Hockey Canada has turned around and said, we're out. You just canceled the World Women's, you just canceled this, you canceled that. We're not on board. We need out. They haven't had anybody walk away. So there's those at both ends of the scale. And I just want to also reference, and I think this is really important, Terry, your comment about there are a lot of discussions going on for sure. I mean, this is in the chat. More so now with uncertainty. And I understand that there's uncertainty out there. And there's a great quote that Doug Nelson gave to me, and he talked about at this time, we should be focusing on providing the certainty of the process. So what we can do versus the certainty of the outcome. What will this look like in 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, 6 months from now? So we need to focus specifically on the process. What can we tell them about the process? We have canceled our event. We have rescheduled our event. Here's what we're thinking of doing. What are your thoughts on that? And that not that this is what's going to happen in 6 months' time, because we don't know that that's going to happen. So I think it's important that we understand that we talk about the process with our partners as opposed to the outcomes specifically, but understanding their specific needs. And the same thing might go with if you're a sponsor and you're financially okay to weather this storm over the next 3 or 4 months. And I think you also have to understand that this is unprecedented from a health perspective, a worldwide pandemic in our lifetime. It has happened before, as my daughter pointed out at 14 years of age, that it happened in 1820, 1920, and 2020. If we look at the bubonic plague and the Spanish flu, and now COVID-19. So most of us were not around for either of those. In fact, I'm guessing of the people that are on this call, none of us were for either of those. So the scenario comes down to that. This is unprecedented. But at the same time, we have to understand that there is history, there is other experiences that have happened that we can go to, and we can see how they reacted to scenarios. So the important part also is to know that if this lasts for 3 months, let's call it 4 months, then we're in isolation and businesses are shut down. 4 months, the average person works for 40 years in their working life. That's less than 1% of the time. This is a blip in time. And as you pointed out, Brad, it will come to an end. There will be an end to this, just like there was after 9/11, just like there was after the forest fires in Fort McMurray, or the ice storms in the Gatineau, Ottawa region. So when we look at it, this is but a blip in time. It's less than 1% of our working life. And we just need to get through it today and then move on. So, sorry, I went a little off topic there.
No, all good. Terry, I saw you were active in the chat. Did you want to jump in?
Yeah, thanks for having me. I think one of the things that, Brent kind of asked the question, we have regular conversations with our clients and our partners in the sponsorship world, so it's nothing new for us. I think one of the things that we have ramped up is internally making sure our team's comfortable and everything's going well with the team from a mental health perspective, and certainly from a health perspective. So weekly check-ins for sure, almost daily. But we've really ramped up our conversations with our clients to know their operational needs, and that's the words that we're using, because there's some contracts that we have forwarded that don't run till September or October, but we pay them in May and June. So we want to make sure that the money that we're funding them, what is it going to, and is it a survival mode, or is it just a regular thing that is necessitated for their needs for paying for facilities or paying for guest speakers as they approach. And, so the conversations that we're having are probably escalated a little bit more than normal. But I've got a great team that works with me, and they're on it on a regular basis in a normal situation. But I think now in this pandemic mode that we're in, we've just escalated. So we're staying really close to the ground with the Flames and the Oilers. We're staying really close with the Stampeders, hearing what's coming out of the CFL. Sounds like they're going to remove 7 games from the schedule. So we want to know, what are we going to be doing potentially when that goes live? And if it goes live, what does it look like? Do we skinny back some of our activations? But certainly we're looking after our partnerships and our internal audience first and foremost in these times.
Great, thanks, Terry. And I think it's one of those interesting things is, looking at, things are changing, they're fluid. What's your planning, and what's going to happen coming out of this? And it may be a 2-month plan, it may be a 6-month plan, it'll have to change. Sort of my background working, in Toronto with a major attraction here with the Ontario Science Centre through SARS in 2003. And that was 40% of our attendance got hit. The city of Toronto was just decimated in terms of tourism. So being very much more localized in comparison to what we're facing right now. And looking as well at 2008, the government engagement after that was really good, really strong, but you couldn't come out flat-footed. So you needed to have some preparation for what we were looking at, what was going to be different, how you were going to engage partners, and then those government funds that were coming, they weren't coming 100% government funds. You needed to have your partners on board. So there's definitely some things to be looking at in terms of what can you be building and developing for when things do turn around, that you're ready to go. And then I think you've got your partners aligned with some of those conversations. But I think even now, there's a lot of events are going virtual. There's definitely a plethora of webinars and web content out there. I've seen some that have been fantastic speakers on it, but the tech hasn't been great. I've seen ones that have been really good engagement. I know, Brent, you've been participating in a number of them. Have you seen any that have really stood out for you?
I think that there's what I've seen, everything that I've done to date in this fashion, whether it's with yourselves or with other organizations in a sort of public broadcast opportunity like this, has been on Zoom. It's been good. The system works well, and I think what we're going to do or going to virtually see is virtual reality from the perspective that conferences are going to have to look at going virtual if they want to do something in the short term right now. And I'll tell you the best example I saw, and I did not attend it, and I have not seen the outcome yet. And if there's anybody on here that has, that would be great. But I give kudos to the AFP, Association of Fundraising Professionals Global. They had their big conference, their annual conference scheduled for Baltimore in the middle of March. And it was scheduled to go, and I think there's several thousand people that go to that, and they had to cancel, obviously. And as a result, they immediately went to virtual. They had a full virtual conference. At that conference, they had their speakers. They were in rooms. As I said, I did not attend it. I did not pay the $7.99 or whatever it was to attend, which was way less expensive than the several $1,000s for registration for the live in Baltimore type product if it had gone through. But we some of the websites that I've seen that are producing great virtual event type scenarios are vfairs.com. So the vfairs, virtualfairs.com, and they do a great scenario for you. The other one is virtualtradeshowshosting.com. And again, creating a virtual scenario. And then the third one that I like is 6Connects, 6, and then the word connects with an EX on the end instead of a CT, 6connects.com. And in each of those 3 cases, those have been around for a while, but they've always been expensive. And you don't see a lot of people going there. But I think that we are going to see that. We're going to see a shift to more virtual conferences to begin with. and virtual events. We've already seen that with the reality of esports themselves. And, you know, you can play sports and you can play on a sport team and you can be sitting in your bedroom on your bed with your legs crossed. And that's esports today. So when we're looking at that, I mean, that's not at the competitive level, but that's no different than playing Timbits hockey and growing up through that process. But I think we're going to see that shift to virtual. Let's also look at the reality of what is shifting. And I think we'll see at those types of events, there will be a virtual component that there never was before. So you'll still have live events. Some of the stats that I've seen recently is that coming out of I think it was IMI, yeah, it was IMI. And in that, they've shown that when they did the study in sort of mid-March, just as the isolation was being created, the middle of March to the third week of March, all their studies showed that people believed that when this COVID-19 was over, they would be shifting very slowly to go back to live events, whether they were conferences, concerts, hockey games, CFL, Terry, whatever it is. They would go back very slowly, and they would go back locally and community. So I'm not traveling from Nanaimo to Vancouver for a concert. I'm not traveling from Vancouver to Merritt for a weekend concert. I am not, traveling to Regina to go to a Riders game or something like that. So that we will be resuming, but it'll be slow and it'll be community based. It'll be, I'll go to the local festival. I will go to, I may not go to as many concerts as I had planned this summer. Their survey a couple weeks later, so April 3rd, showed that was going out the window. That people being cooped up for 2 weeks already were ready to go back. They want to go to their NHL game. They want to go to their CFL game. Don't seem to be worried as much as they were about easing back in slowly and those sorts of things. So we're seeing that, and imagine what it's going to be like when you've been cooped up for 2 months, let alone 2 weeks. I think that we will see an onslaught for live events happening. I know that our own Western Sponsorship Congress and working with the Sport Travel Group in Ontario for their 2 events, the one in Edmonton the one in Ottawa and Toronto, and Timewise Event Management out of Edmonton that runs the WSC Alberta Conference. They're already building out their programs. They're building out, inviting their speakers, because one's at the end of September and the other 2 are in October. And the plan is that, hopefully we'll be back to quasi new normal by then, and that those will be much needed events, because that will be where people can gather and talk and grab a beer and engage with others outside of this virtual situation. And as a result, there will also be industry leaders talking about what are the next steps? Where are we going with COVID-19? People are going to need more answers and be able to do it in a environment like that, rather than just through webinars and virtual scenarios. So I think we're going to see a lot of that shift, and it's going to happen quickly and dramatically, whether it's with sport, whether it's with the arts, whether it's with cultural events, or whether it's with conferences. That when this comes back in the late summer, early fall, mid-fall, whenever it is, I think we're going to see an onslaught.
Yeah, and I definitely think there's going to be an interesting consumer pickup. And I know from a couple of the sessions that I've been sitting in on brands and sessions like this, there's definitely been a really big concern about tone. Brands are being really careful about how they approach their current communications. I have definitely on a number of mail lists from brands who have not changed their tone at all, and I think I get about 3 or 4 emails from them a day advertising out to me, and I think that's going to resonate stronger with a lot of individuals about how that's come across. You look at Subaru's got a pretty good campaign out right now, where I've seen them. They've taken their their ad spot, and they said this was when we would normally run our ad, but in this now that we're going to thank all the first responders and those people on the front line. So they're looking at ways that they can engage their brand in the situation, keeping themselves top of mind, but not being the focus of it. And I know, Steve, you've jumped in with a question, and you, Mo, the same question is, how are we having these conversations with partners right now? There are definitely some brands who and some silos that are really being impacted by this. If you're in travel tourism, probably not a good time to be coming with an ask to them, or if you're in pursuing anybody in the restaurant industry, I think you're going to have the same impact. Oil out west is definitely being decimated for a number of reasons, some associated with COVID, some associated with other external pieces. But Brent, who have you seen that's doing well? I think restaurants aren't doing well, but supermarkets are definitely busy and people are stocking up.
I haven't seen the numbers, the financials for the Western Group or anything like that. And everybody talks about how well they're doing and they're quote unquote busy, but they're not. They've got, I go to our local superstore, and granted there's or Costco or Walmart or whatever. And sometimes there's a lineup outside. You can't get in, but they're still limited to 50 or 75 or 100 people, depending on what jurisdiction you're in. And that includes staff. So there's not a lot of people in those stores. Granted, they are open and they are doing business, but I don't think, and this is just me, I haven't seen any data, and if anybody knows any more, that would be great, but they're not doing the volumes they would have been doing if COVID-19 hadn't happened. Are they doing better than the guy that had to close down his local grocery store? Absolutely. But so when I start to look at that, I think that you nailed a key point there, and it's the messaging that's going on. And also looking at Steve's comment in the chat column, I think that the time to ask is when the time to ask is right. Whether COVID-19 is happening or whether we're in the height of a boom market, doesn't matter. You don't make the ask at the wrong time. And the only way you know when it's the right time is if you're communicating. So I would encourage that you're reaching out to your partners and finding out about their business and how they're doing and what else they're doing, and ask them, what else are you doing with your other partners, your other properties you're engaged in? And they might give you the answer right there. We've had to cancel all of them. Okay. So how can we help you? What can we do? And then that's not the right time for a renewal ask, or a new ask. So I think the answer to that is that of a consultant. I'm not going to give you a solid answer. I'm going to say it depends. And that depends specifically on the scenario that your partner is going through. When I start to look at what some of the brands are doing, and you touched on this, Brad, it was about what is their messaging today? And I've heard this from several people, and I really like it, and I can't remember who I'm stealing it from, but it's not my words to start with, but it is that of several people, and that's the fact that what happens in this 8 to 10 weeks for every brand, and I don't care whether you're a brand as Bauer hockey equipment or whether you are a brand Toronto International Film Festival, which is a property. They are all brands. And how you react in this 8 to 10 week period is how people will remember your brand for the next decade. So if you're out there doing the right things, like the description that you just had of Subaru, or I live in BC, and you know what? I got an email from BC Hydro, my electrical bill. Anybody, and it just said anybody that is having troubles through COVID-19, if you have lost your job, or you have been laid off, or you have been shortened your hours, here's a form, fill it out. If you qualify, we are not going to defer payments. We are going to give you a credit of 3 times your average monthly bill. So if I was paying $100 a month to BC Hydro, and the end result was that I had been laid off, I could apply for this and I would get a credit on my account for $300, which should tide me through at least 3 months. Am I going to remember BC Hydro on that? Absolutely. And then we take a look at like the telcos, the TELUS, the Bells, the Rogers. They've all dropped any overage fees. Am I going to remember that? Yeah, I am. And is my company doing that? I'm going to check. I want to see where my overage is and if I'm getting billed on it. And we take a look at other companies like Budweiser, who stepped up and said, you know, the $5 million that we had planned to invest in sponsorship in the next little while and in media buys is all going directly to COVID and healthcare workers. So they stood up and said, we still got that money, but this is where we're redirecting it to. We look at all of the companies in the small and large distilleries that have shifted their production over to sanitizer. We look at Bauer, the hockey manufacturer, now producing shields, Dyson producing ventilators. So these are stories that we'll all remember down the line. We'll all remember what those brands did. And there are some that haven't had such great insights to start with. And I think that there's a hockey club that, you know, when this all came to be, they laid off all their workers. I mean, obviously, especially all their part-time workers inside their stadiums. And one of those large organizations said, well, we won't be paying those people. Ultimately, they were bullied into the fact that they would have to be paying them, or they should be paying them, and they are now. But that was a misstep in my estimation. And we will remember that. And that might be what that organization is remembered for during this period, which isn't what anybody wants. So we need to look at those. I mean, Allstate stepped forward about 3 or 4 days ago to say, you know what, nobody's driving their cars. We are going to cut back by 15% on everybody's premiums effective today. I've now seen that more insurance companies are doing that on their auto insurance in Canada right now. But says Allstate, that's a loss of $600 million of revenue. And then I look at Pepsi. They've just diverted all of their TV and digital buy for the next 2 months, specifically to an upcoming concert on April 18th, which is called the One World Together at Home concert. And all that digital and media buy money that they would have been spending is going to the concert, and that is a fundraiser for healthcare workers and their needs. So these are the types of things that companies that we're seeing in the marketplace. It isn't all about sponsorship. It's about your brand right now. And I don't care whether you are Princess Margaret, whether you're Comic-Con, whether you are the Toronto Maple Leafs. It is about what is your brand doing as a property? What are you doing in the marketplace? And for those brands that are sponsors and corporations, the same thing goes. What is the message that you're giving? And Terry, I like the fact that, you know, that the time that you guys are spending with your customers and helping them operationally. And I just saw RBC did the same thing. They just retrained 20 or so key people to be able to retrain others to provide services that didn't exist before COVID-19, so that they can help their customers. I think the financial institutions in our company are doing a really good job. The other one that I'm just going to touch on, Brad, is Twitter. I mean, we all talk about fake news and things like that. Well, you know, Twitter's made a couple of steps around this, and specifically, look at the top of your Twitter feed. I mean, the access around COVID will have the federal government, and depending on what jurisdiction you're in, we'll also have the link to the provincial jurisdiction on COVID. So if you do a search inside Twitter asking about information on COVID-19 or COVID-19, it won't take you anywhere other than those two sites. So to make sure that there isn't fake news, also taking a look at, What else are they doing? I mean, how can they've been able to do things that others can't? And one is that control of the fake news, but also they put out a publication on how you can use Twitter through this process to help you and your organization. And if that's a product that is really helpful to be able to know how you can actually get information out through Twitter to your networks. So I think that's kind of what we're seeing, Brad, in the marketplace of who are doing things, who are doing it right. But it all comes back to, as I said, it's your brand and how you are representing your brand, your organization today and over the next month and the past 3 or 4 weeks is how people are going to remember you.
I wanted to share also, we do a lot of work with Loblaws, and to mirror what you're saying, Brent, as well as ATB. For Loblaws, and for those folks in the to the south who aren't familiar, Loblaws and Shoppers Drug Mart is Canada's largest company, and they are in the grocery business. And for them, they are all hands on deck to protect the supply chain. Everyone is pulled back. They're pulling staff off of their regular jobs in order to ensure that they can actually get the product from field to table. And I've been in their offices for 10 years, and their atrium in Brampton is really a feeling of a lot of humans. A lot of times you go into companies and it feels very stark. You go into the head offices of Shoppers or of Loblaws, and it's a building full of human people, and you're seeing them do this now. And to echo Terry, what you were talking about of working with your current partners, they're doing the same thing. They're looking at how best they can support the programs that they have always been supporting, but trying to figure out doing it another way. So Loblaws being involved with children and food, they realize that they can't help feed the kids at the schools, which has typically been their approach of supporting breakfasts at schools. So now they're working with the Boys and Girls Clubs across Canada in order to change it up, but still with the end goal in mind, and that is to ensure that their goals, and more impact-based sponsorship is still going to continue on even through these difficult times.
Thanks, Mary Beth. And I think one of the go ahead, Brent.
Oh no, it's Terry.
Oh, Terry, sorry.
I was just going to add in, certainly from a sponsorship perspective, it really hasn't changed a lot, but from a banking and being a financial institution in Alberta, it's really pushed us in a lot of ways to get out of our comfort zone. Like, we've been set up to do online banking for years, and it's probably been 8 or 9 years that we switched over our core system. But now, we see the influx or the push really to have that customer experience delivered in a different way, and that's online. So the in-branch experience has obviously declined, but certainly our online capabilities have increased. And I'm sure a lot of the FIs across the country as well as North America are seeing the same thing: is how do you take that experiential component of your core business and really validate it and push it? So we've seen an influx of online applications and new clients come aboard because we're an Alberta institution, but certainly we have a good working procedure and a really core offering available online and really established. So that's really been an eye-opener for us in the last couple of weeks.
So I'm just going to add on to Terry there, and I think that as you indicated, Terry, the financial institutions across Canada have shifted like that, and they've done it really quickly. And there are many industries that have done that. And through COVID-19, we're seeing an impact in change that we never would have seen. If you think about it, they canceled and rescheduled the Olympics, and it took 2 weeks to do. And venues are being done. We have a client who runs a major conference, actually 2 clients that run conferences sort of at the end of May. And I know that Rose from CAMA is one of them, and she's on this call. But that these are two conferences that what was happening at the end of May and the first week of June, and one's about 400 people and the other one's about 2,000 people, and they've had to cancel. And they, it's making decisions like that are on a, they didn't happen as quickly as a snap of fingers. There's a lot of thought process, but decisions that would normally take months to make, if not years, are happening in days and weeks. And when you take a look at the shift to online, to digital, to virtual, and even to virtual reality, we're seeing a shift that COVID-19 is going to move us there so quickly that it's a good thing. And I look at, for example, down, and I just heard the story a few days ago, but down in Australia, they've got, I think it's the University of New South Wales or something like that. And at the university, they've been talking for over a decade about shifting to digital and being able to have online classes. And they were less than 10% of the way there. In a mere 4 weeks, their entire curriculum is now online, and they are teaching virtually to their students. So when we look at that, these are the things that can happen because of an event like this, and we have to start to think differently. So from the sponsorship perspective, we have to understand that the world is going to be different at the other end. That if you really think about it, experiential marketing is on life support right now. Going to festivals, going to a CFL game, those things are on life support if they're not dead. But how is it going to come back? And I think we need to start to look at that. Who is going to be doing sampling in the first 9 months after COVID-19? Nobody. So if you're a food producer and you've been used to sampling at a major event, a festival, a conference, an NHL game, a CFL game, and sampling product that people can take and eat or test or use or touch and feel and hold, that isn't happening. When you start to look at it, that every 2 feet, there's going to be a sanitizing machine, someplace that you can get sanitizer. Those are things that are going to be different, and they're going to stay, and they're not going to change. I predict it'll be at least a year before sampling comes back in. But your premium product or your premium opportunities that you want to sample that aren't food and touchables, can you do it digitally? Can you drive? Can you give somebody something that takes them by a link to a website that they can download and order it for delivery? Well, look, as a brand, you now have their mailing address included to their email address. So there's lots of benefits that are going to come out of this, but we have to understand that that world is going to look really different than it did before.
Yeah, and it's definitely going to be a change all around, whether you're on the brand side or whether you're on the asking side. And I think going back to Steve and Mo's questions about how are you having those conversations now? And I know from a couple of our clients, they're still doing deals. And chatting with Judy Haber last week, talking about municipal naming rights and municipal sponsorship, there are still deals that are being done within this. Are you going to go out and do a cold call now? Probably not. Unless you've got, my recommendation, unless you've got something that can help them meet the tone that they're looking to deliver. The relationship of Loblaws and Boys and Girls Clubs was there, but I don't think it was there at the level that it was previously. So they were able to say, okay, here's how we can take what you've been doing in terms of breakfast clubs in the schools, and we can still bring that to people on the ground while they're at home. So I'm not knowing the background of whether that initiative came from Loblaw's end or whether it came from Boys and Girls end, but when you're looking around at who's in the community, who matches what you do, and what can you do to help facilitate the conversations they're looking to have now, or even floating ideas, I think that becomes more conversational piece. Definitely there are people in the community who will be doing well or be doing better than others. And then you can start having those thoughts about, okay, how do they want to engage and look like they're providing back into the community? One of our clients does a lot of work with CFOs and heads of finance, and there's a lot of thought leadership that is being provided by the sponsors. So all of their in-person events have now flipped into virtual events because that thought leadership is still needed, and probably in a lot of ways needed more now. So it really fits with them to be able to shift that positioning. So they've lost a couple sponsors who were going to be at their big national conference, but most of them have still wanted to engage because the businesses themselves still have targets. They still have things that they're looking at. This is Q1, Q2 for them. They still have to look at how are they going to feed Q3, Q4, and into next year. So if there's opportunities for you to plug into that and assist, I think it's well worth looking at. And it may take more research time, and it may take a different style of conversation with people to have that engagement. And I think, Brent, as you're talking about just the in-person events and how that's going to change, I'm going to pick on Gilbert because Gilbert is here. Gilbert, I mean, you run 14, fan expos and Comic-Cons across North America. What's that looking like for you? And those are high touch events where people come for the experience of meeting those celebrities. And what's your go-to been?
Well, precisely. Nice to see everyone. Hey, Brent and Brad, Mary Beth, quite a few people here on the screen. Recognize some names. Well, we have we have 14 events across Canada and the U.S. and we're in the business of bringing people together to celebrate fandom. So it has impacted us considerably, just like everyone else, unfortunately. But we've had to cancel some of our events, unfortunately. Obviously a responsible thing to do in support of this restrictions and so forth, but most of our events in the US have been postponed. We have pushed them to June, July, and August, but we are experiencing, obviously, things are changing at a rapid pace in the US, so we are monitoring those events very closely. We've seen our sponsors have been supporting us right through to the end, following us as we continue to, we're keeping them informed and monitoring the progress in terms of whether or not the event will continue. However, we've shifted our conversation. We're not selling any new sponsorships right now, just given everything. We're maintaining a very close communication with all of our brand partners. We have two very, very great sponsorship professionals on our team that have invested time and years in the sponsorship field, who've maintained these relationships. So we've maintained a very open communication with them. With our events in Canada, again, those are all been postponed. So we have events that are happening in August and September. We don't know what's going to happen there, but instead of sort of looking at acquiring any new potential partners, we've shifted our focus and our energy on trying to create new opportunities looking towards the future. We have brands that have been supporting us for over 25 years who continue to support us, but they're also looking for ways to target new audience growth objectives, especially after COVID-19. So, some of the conversations that we've been having in market is with our community partners and other festival and events that either have canceled or have postponed, to look at ways that we can collaborate through a disruptive manner to create sort of new audiences, into the future. So building on audience, because a lot of these events depend highly on attendance. We depend on gate admissions. Our sponsorship revenue is pretty, substantial. However, we benefit greatly from our gate admissions. And so audience growth is very important, and we're finding that we're getting quite a number of exciting opportunities that we're hoping to be able to leverage into the future. So instead of focusing on what we can't control, we're trying to build a future forward look in terms of, you know, what's going to happen after COVID-19. You know, people are not spending as much. People are not going to be going out. You know, there's going to be a lot of fear in the market. But what is it going to look like from a year from now? So we're looking towards the future and trying to build collaborations now, get a sense of the excitement there, and get our partners excited about investing or sponsoring these types of ideas. So, you know, there's only so much we can do now to control. We don't have a crystal ball. We don't know if the shows are going to go, but if you maintain sort of contact with city officials, festival partners, keep your brands engaged. All of our brands, we speak to them on a weekly basis. And, you know, now they're reaching out to us and saying, hey, we have an idea. How can we partner? You know, what is it going to take for us? You know, maybe it's going to be, you know, sort of a 3-year deferred payment plan. We're okay with that as long as we maintain that connection with our brands and our community people. So,
thanks, Gilbert. Thanks for jumping in that. I know we're just coming up on.
I was just going to say,
go ahead, Brent.
I really like what Gilbert had to say, and I think that one of the key points that I took out of that, Gilbert, was something that we're talking with our clients about right now, and that's if you've canceled something, not postponed, but canceled something, now's the time to be looking at 2021. When I used to sell hockey, I used to sell 9 months out. So when I was selling NHL hockey, come November of the season, so the season's only, you know, a month in, I'm selling for the following season. This is the opportunity for those people that have canceled a gala, canceled a walk, you know, those sorts of things that were supposed to happen in March or July or June or whatever. Start planning for 2021. Start to build the relationships, start to talk about them. I mentioned Air Canada earlier, and it's pretty funny, as my wife and I were talking about last night. That sure is great that they, you know, extended my Aeroplan Super Elite status right through to December 2021. So I don't have to maintain over 100 flights this year to get there because I'm just not going to do it. I was really pleased with that. But when we really look a little deeper, you know, Aeroplan was to be launching their new Aeroplan, the whole program in July of this year. It gives them another 12 months to build out the program and make sure it's going to be perfect. And that loyalty program will be able to factor in COVID-19 effects, unlike other loyalty programs that are already up and running. So there's some silver linings to this. And if you did lose the revenue, you did lose the opportunity, now's the time to be thinking of 2021. Don't wait till January to think about it.
Yeah, no, and I think that's really important as we're kind of wrapping up. I know we're just hitting the 2 o'clock mark here in Toronto, but you know, some of the big elements kind of coming out of this conversation is, you know, making sure you're communicating with your partners. The more you know about what's going on with them and tell them about your planning, I think that's going to be really imperative to that successful relationship building and relationship maintenance at the moment. You know, are you going to be turning new deals in the next little while? There is potential of that. I think you need to be watchful of the tone of your approach, and from brands looking at how they're matching what their consumers are going to see. But even that, it's the planning for further out. When we're coming out of this, is what's going to look different? How is, you know, the program going to look? How is it going to look for ramping up? It may not be a green light go. It may be a yellow light and a slow build. So being able to be poised for those ramp ups, and whether it's implementing slowly or running right away, and then looking at the industries that are hurting within your portfolio. Are there ways to engage with them to be a good partner through that? And the ones that are looking for audience growth, is how do you facilitate that? So, you know, whether if you're tourism, you're impacted now, but when the government starts green lighting it, they're going to be wanting to get people feeling good about travel, and can you be part of that conversation? You know, definitely feel free to drop any questions to Brent or myself. We're happy to engage with you and field anything you're thinking of or comments you might have. Really appreciate everybody's time today. We have videotaped this. We'll be putting it up onto our Sponsor Circle website, and I know Brent will be sharing it as well. We're running a session next Wednesday, roughly the same time. We'll post information on Eventbrite and share that with the group. It's going to be focused on pivoting your tech, looking at ways that you can take what you're doing in terms of communication and technical abilities, sharing actually Mary Beth's experience of 15 years working with major corporations, talking about marketing communications, engaging with audience, engaging with internal audience. So we're going to be looking at that from a sponsor perspective, and happy to have you on board. Really thank Brent for your contribution and everybody else who stepped in with questions and insight, and look forward to seeing you in the future. Stay safe, guys.